having to deal with the issue. This week on Sport Today, we have a 4-part investigation into the subject from our reporter Seth Bennett, who was surrounded by the brains of former athletes at Boston University's Research Centre.
That is the sound of the freezers here at the Brain Bank. If I turn around, there's buckets. Each one has a different brain in it with the weight labelled, written in pen on the outside. Above it, there are slivers of brain in Tupperware, the kind of thing that you maybe would put your sandwiches in before you go to work in the morning. The far end of this room, there's the big freezers, and then there's a great big silver table in the middle, and that's where much of the research is done.
It's been amazing. We just didn't realize that this was something that could be affecting us in the modern era of sports.
That's neuropathologist Dr. Anne McKee, who's the director of the CTE Centre of Boston University. So she's best placed to explain exactly what CTE is.
So it's a progressive deterioration of the brain that in all recorded instances has been a result of repetitive brain trauma. We started a brain bank looking at the brains of athletes and military veterans about 6 years ago, and now we have over 230 brains in the brain bank. We've got about 135 cases of CTE.
Chris Nowinski is a former college American football player and a professional wrestler who was forced to retire because of concussions. Since then, he's founded the Sports Legacy Institute to try and help others in the same position as himself.
When I was injured, I never realized I was getting concussions. I wasn't educated. And so it wasn't until I met Dr. Robert Cantu, who became my co-founder of SLI, that I started putting the pieces together that every time I was hitting the head and I saw stars and I got dinged and the sky would change colors, that those were actually concussions, and that I'd ruined my career in health in the ignorance of thinking I need to push through this. And it wasn't hard for me to realize that I wasn't the only guy doing that, and that, you know, I've been watching athletes on TV get knocked out and put back in and lauded for that for years, and that activity and that kind of cultural neglect of concussion was actually really hurting people. I didn't realize that until I was hurt myself. The reality is it's hard from the brain bank perspective to realize how widespread this is. But when you put your ear to the ground and you start to hear the stories about it, you realize that this is not a small problem. I mean, luckily, only a small percentage of the population gets hit in the head for 20 years. But among those folks, this is a consistent issue.
It is the biggest lawsuit in the history of sports that targets the NFL, and the accusation that the league covered up how many players had suffered serious head injuries.
The National Football League has estimated that it will have to pay out around $1 billion to thousands of former players.
Despite those lawsuits and the fact that concussions in sport are very much headline news these days, it's done little to deter some of the current generation of NFL players, including these San Francisco 49ers.
For the football, you're going to get hit. Because the other side's getting paid to hit you. I think they've overswung the boundary, football's been around for a long time. Everybody's fine, so let's keep going. Yeah, football's football, right? We know where they put it for a reason.
So how do you protect those who are pretty happy with the current situation and aren't too worried about problems they may face in the future? That's the issue. Jeff Miller, who's the NFL's Senior Vice President for Health and Safety, has to face each and every day.
Players want to play. And I think that's true whether you're talking about NFL football players or kids playing soccer or girls playing soccer. Athletes want to stay on the field, and that's true of any and all athletes. So when you talk to somebody about the risks associated with concussion and make sure that they're managed correctly, it's one thing to put rules into the game and enforcing them, but you also have to have the players to buy into it, to understand and appreciate what the challenges are.
Despite those steps, it's expected that over 150 players will still get concussions this season. And allied to the fact that NFL players are twice as likely to suffer from some form of dementia, this is a problem.
That's our reporter, Seth Bennett, who will have a look at the impact of living with concussion-related illnesses on Sport Today on Tuesday. We'll be hearing from the former NHL top guy, Todd Federer, who had over 100 fights in his career.
I was 3 or 4, going through it with my age gap for what they consider some of the all the time for what it was. It's got to be double digits looking back on it.
Just a little tease for you there. And speaking of teases, don't forget, before the end of the programme, we will reveal the names of 3 nominees for the BBC African Footballer of the Year who have not won. By 1700 GMT, only 2 names will remain. You're listening to Sport Today on the BBC World Service with me, Steve Crossman. To the English Premier League now, and the Liverpool manager Brendan Rodgers has played down talk of a bust-up between himself and Steven Gerrard. That's after the midfielder was dropped from the starting 11 for Saturday's win over Stoke. Rodgers also confirmed that Gerrard is now considering a new contract offer to remain at Anfield.
Things that Steve would have to think about in a decision like this, but it certainly won't be and at length, and that won't be the case. So I think that between now and the end of the season, he deserves that opportunity to have a think of where it's at. I love working with Steven Gerrard. He's arguably the best player that played in the Premier League. I give him the opportunity to think of what it takes in order to decide what he wants to do next. So I've seen some things yesterday which was unfortunate in terms of a relationship. I think if there's 2 words that would describe our relationship, it would be honest and respect. I think he's at the stage of his career where it's not so much the number of games that he plays now, it's about the level of the game, and that's always something I'll always work with him and we'll look at.
So Gerrard has reached a crossroads in his career, and to look at what will the people need to stay? One club man like Gerrard, who only missed out on the 1966 World Cup squad because he was injured. He played his entire club career for Blackpool, and he's been telling me it's up to every individual player to recognise when they're past their peak.
You've got to be aware that when you get to a certain age, you know, you can't do, and you haven't got the ambition and the drive and the young spark that you had 15 years previous. Much depends on what the manager thinks as well. You know, you might have been there a long time, but the manager will make the decision. But as players, when you come towards the end, you've got to realise that, you know, things are not the same today as they were yesterday.
Is that a difficult thing, though, Jimmy, to accept that you can't start every game?
You can't start every game. I think that is conceivable. Because once it happens, and it has happened, I mean, it was unthinkable, really, that Stevie Gerrard sort of left out of Liverpool's team. He's been one of the best players we've had in the last few years. And to be left out of the Liverpool team, where he is a football legend, it seems a little bit odd. Liverpool team without him. But the time will come, as it came to me, and it came to Stanley Matthews and to Tom Finney, and, you know, the really great players, you know, the really top liners, all have to accept, you know, Bobby Charlton. It's the cruel fact of being a professional footballer. What would your prediction be about Steven Gerrard? What do you think he will do in the end? Liverpool might have a use for him. When needed, 1 or 2 players have done that. That might win his mind to start.
That was great, Jimmy Armwood speaking to us on Sport Today. We're going to stay with football, because if you think that Steven Gerrard and Liverpool are struggling and finishing second in the Premier League, then wait until you hear about Borussia Dortmund. The remarkable decline of last season's Bundesliga runners-up has reached a new low at the bottom of the table. For the first time in 29 years, they're Eintracht Frankfurt over the weekend. Just over 18 months since they were in the Champions League final. So what is going wrong? Well, the former Dortmund striker Murdo McLeod joined the club 2 years after they were last in this unenviable position. He's been telling me that part of the reason they are getting worse is that others are getting better.
A lot of the clubs in the past, or maybe in the second Bundesliga, or one of the league down in the third division, but over the years have been money pumped into these smaller clubs, and now they're becoming stronger, they've got better quality players, so it's not as easy as it's been in the past for the big sides. You just need to look at the bottom end of the table when you get Werder Bremen down there just above Freiburg, with Stuttgart, Hamburg and Dortmund. Even last year I thought Dortmund were still a good side in the Bundesliga. They were up there chasing Bayern Munich, and there's so many people looking at Dortmund. 5-10 years ago it wasn't so much highlighted if you have Dortmund on the table, but now they've always been a challenge to Bayern Munich. possibly the only side in Germany to be a challenge to Bayern Munich, and now they're sitting the table apart. And I think Dortmund now, they've got to look at their game, look at themselves, and whether you're one of the top players or not, you've still got to pull your sleeves up and go on with it. And Jurgen Klopp, he's got a good atmosphere within the club, but sometimes you just think you just got to get maybe a wee bit harder and heavier on the players and make sure you get a better reaction from them.
It's interesting, I guess, if you were in charge of a Bundesliga team that was struggling, Jurgen Klopp's exactly the kind of guy you would want to come in and sort it out. But at the same time, because Jurgen Klopp is already in charge of Dortmund and they are struggling, do you think there's any chance that the owners might look at the situation and Jurgen Klopp's position could be in any doubt?
For me, that would be the biggest shock ever if Jurgen Klopp was to be removed as manager. I think every Dortmund fan's behind him. They've been behind him overall the year. I've watched him getting stronger and stronger all the time. Put down what's going on at Dortmund. Question mark, and no one knows. But I don't think there's any way that the Presidium at Dortmund will be looking at Jurgen Klopp thinking maybe we could change this and bring someone else in. Jurgen Klopp is one of the most sought after coaches in European football. I'm sure if Jurgen Klopp wants to leave at any point, you've got a number of top English clubs who've taken.
It was 1985 the last time Borussia got at the bottom of the Bundesliga. You joined Dortmund in 1987, so not long after they were going through a particularly bad time. At that stage, they were able to turn things around quickly. What is it about Borussia Dortmund which sees them able to sort of pick themselves up out of these troughs?
They're a typical working man's club. They get possibly the best fans in the world. Absolutely unbelievable amount of fans coming up to the game. You look at them just now, even when they're struggling at the bottom of the table, they're still having 75, 80,000 people coming up to the game. When I was there as a player, the fans were incredible. And then just going back to when Dortmund were down at the bottom of the table 30 odd years ago, it was one of a teammate of mine, Jürgen Redmond. I think he scored the winner in the playoff game to get Dortmund safe from relegation that year, and then within 2 years Dortmund had qualified for European football and they drew Celtic after I just left Celtic. So in 2 short years of missing the bottom of the table, 2 years later they're qualifying for Europe, and that's just Dortmund just to really flip the whole thing round about.
And they weren't relegated, were they?
No chance, absolutely no chance. Mind you, if you're sitting in Hamburg just now, they'll be saying the same. Stuttgart will be saying the same. Werder Bremen will be saying the same. All these big clubs. But I just think Dortmund they've got the quality. And I always think in football, if you're going through a bad spell, make sure it's at the end of the season.
That is the former Borussia Dortmund striker Erdo McLeod speaking to us on Sport Today. In just a few moments, we will be telling you 3 of the shortlisted players for the BBC African Footballer of the Year who have not won. It's almost time to find out. I'll just read a couple of your social media messages. We've been asking who should be crowned the 2014 champion. Osanemi in Nigeria. Somewhat unsurprisingly, I think we can say, says Vincent Enyema, the outstanding goalie, should have it this time. Medre in Uganda says, I trust that Borussia Dortmund player Yes. Bamian Dia in Jamaica says simply, Yaya Toure. We'll find out 3 of the names who haven't won the award very shortly. But first, for most sports teams, breaking records is something that's there to be celebrated. However, for the Philadelphia 76ers, at the moment that couldn't be further from the truth. To avoid recording the worst start in NBA history, they must beat San Antonio, Minnesota, or Oklahoma City before Friday. Otherwise, with a welcome record, 19 games to win it that season. There's for more on this. We can go live to Philadelphia now. It's CBS Radio's Spike. Hello, Spike.
Hey, how are you?
Better than the Philadelphia 76ers. Why are they struggling so much?
Well, they don't have a lot of talent, which will usually hurt you in professional sports.
That's a problem.
It's a problem. They're sort of designed to be bad because the worse you are, the better draft pick you get, so you get a better chance at a better player in the NBA. And it also gives them a chance to sort of try out these young guys that haven't gotten a shot elsewhere. So that's sort of a recipe for bad, and they have been every bit of that so far this year.
They didn't have a great season last season either, though, did they?
No, they only won 19 games last season, and that actually was sort of surprising how many they did win. They opened up with 3 in a row last year, sort of surprising everyone, but they did at one point last year lose 26 in a row. So at this point, 16 in a row doesn't seem like so much.
And we thought Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund had problems. Well, stay with us, Mike. We're going to get an insight now on the feeling inside the 76ers camp. KJ Daniels says there is one particular area of their play that they need to work on.
We have to, with coaching them, we have to put that on. Turn the ball over a lot. Even myself, starting with me. We just have to find a way to, execute and find a way to cut down on our turnovers.
Just one thing to work on fighting.
They should probably cut down on their turnovers, get better at defense, get better at offense, and then if they are able to do all those 3 things at once, they may end up with a win in the next few.
So get better at basketball.
Yes, to put it quite simply, if they were better at basketball, they'd have a better chance at winning. That's a good way to put it.
We're kind of laughing at this a little bit, which is maybe harsh, but I wonder, we were listening to KJ McDaniels there. Do you think, to an extent, they are somewhat reveling in this notoriety that they're getting?
An enemy has been slain.
I don't know. I think it's the wrong kind of notoriety. I think the organization as a whole might not mind it because the publicity may help them on some level, but the players themselves who are for all intents and purposes going out there and trying as hard as they can, and many of who have succeeded at every level up until now. They're all very young, and you would imagine that high school and college teams are all very good to come to this situation is, I think, sort of difficult on them. KJ McDaniels is interesting. His mother has even complained on Twitter that the team is so bad and her son is not getting enough playing time. So he seems like he has another issue to deal with as well.
Spike, lovely to talk to you. That's CBS Radio Spike Messi joining us on Sport Today. Now, the moment you've been waiting for. The BBC African Footballer of the Year will be announced at 17:35 on Focus on Africa and right across the world service. But right now, we have 5 potential winners, and in the next few minutes, we'll put that down to 2 by eliminating 3 players who haven't won this year. First, though, here's a reminder of all 5 men whose performances in 2014 put them in contention.
For the African in their respective league.
Yaya Toure, super free kick. Yaya Toure equalises and does his talking on the pitch.
Brahimi spectacularly against the run of play in the second half. To Gervinho. Gervinho done and scores. He missed a few last week, but he hasn't missed here today.
Getting nominated for awards like this, you don't get it every day.
Absolutely brilliant from Victor Enyema is a top keeper.
So it's something awesome, something you lack words to express.
Aubameyang scores! And Aubameyang with the finishing touch, losing his balance but still able to score.
There you are, all of the nominees, but it is time to knock out 3 of those names. All we need is I think that'll do, won't it? Yeah, we'll have some of that. So, in no particular order, the BBC Footballer of the Year is not Gervinho. Gervinho is out of the running for the award, and the BBC African Footballer of the Year is not Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. He has not won the award this time around. So we have 1 to go. Our final name to eliminate then. The BBC African Footballer of the Year for 2014 is not this man.
Toure with the drive and in! Took a deflection on the way through, but Yaya Toure's in scoring form again.
Yeah, that's right. Yaya Toure has not won the BBC African Footballer of the Year. Remember, he won the award last year, but he will not get there this time around. So, what that means is that we have just 2 names left. So the winner this year of the BBC African Footballer of the Year is either Vincent Enyema, Nigeria's international goalkeeper, or it could be Yassine Brahimi, the Algerian winger. So, you are going to find out by listening to Peter. He is going to reveal to you the winner. That will happen at 17:35. It will be right across the BBC World Service. We'll also be on BBC World News as well. Listen to Peter Watcher. He will tell you who is the winner of of the BBC African Footballer of the Year. We're waiting very, very much to find out what is going to happen with that award. In fact, we can go live to Peter Akwache now. You can't tell us where you are, Peter, but you've got 30 seconds to build the tape.
Well, I tell you what, I mean, it's a very exciting day for us here as well, because we've gathered a lot of votes. The African fans have spoken, and at 17:35, we are going to be handing over this year's BBC African Player of the Year award. We're on location, but I'm afraid I can't let you know.
Thank you very much, Peter. I was listening for clues. Did you hear any? I don't think I did. That was Peter Akwache. Tune in at 17:35 for the result. But from me, Steve Crossman, that is it from Sport Today.
Documentaries on the BBC World Service.
This is the story of how a religious Canadian farmer became the most glamorous female actress in the 1920s and 30s America.
Divine healing is as old as the Bible itself, and the Word of God endures forever.
Life story of Amy Semple McPherson, Sister Amy, at bbcworldservice.com.
You're listening to the BBC World Service. Hello, I'm Chloe Tree. Join me at 18 GMT for the World News. We'll be discussing reaction in India to a viral video showing overwhelming bus. The world's radio station.
At 16 hours GMT, welcome to the newsroom. I'm Danny Cox. The World Food Programme suspends food aid to Syrian refugees. We'll get the latest live from our correspondent in Beirut. A Congolese military...
An enemy has been slain.
Capacity in one area of your country doesn't mean people who are sick in the other area want to go there.
Suspected Islamist militants have carried out more attacks in northeast Nigeria.
The city is very quiet. Everybody is afraid to come out. We haven't heard anything from the government.
On World AIDS Day, Hollywood star Charlize Theron trying to make a difference.
The mistruths, the half-truths that was spread about how you contracted this virus was brutal, and still today is brutal.
All after this bulletin of world news.
BBC News with Jerry Smith. The World Food Programme says that for the first time in 4 years, it will supply no food aid in December to 1.6 million Syrian refugees because of a lack of funding. It said the move would have devastating consequences for refugees already struggling with a harsh winter. He said the deal with their countries about the shortfall months ago. Gregory Barrow, director of WFP's London office, said he didn't blame any specific country.
I don't really want to point a finger at particular donors, because often as an agency we have a situation where we'll have one country that's able to fund us in one area but not in another. So it's not a situation where donor governments are literally sitting on their hands and refusing to support the World Food Programme anymore. We often find that they are supporting us elsewhere in the world, and this comes at a time when the World Food Programme is grappling with some very complex, very long-running and some very costly emergencies. It's almost an unprecedented situation.
The Tunisian authorities say a policeman has been beheaded by Islamist militants near the border with Algeria. Alan Johnston reports.
The Tunisian government says the policeman was travelling in a car with his brother near the northwestern town of Al-Qaeda. It seems that the brother was soon released after the officer. Since Tunisia's Arab Spring uprising in 2011, have been working to control Islamist extremists. And this northwestern border area around Al-Kaf was the scene last month of an attack in which 4 soldiers were killed.
The World Health Organization has given a positive assessment of efforts to meet today's self-imposed deadlines to bring the Ebola outbreak in West Africa under control. The head of the WHO's Ebola response team, Bruce Elwood, said only Sierra Leone had failed to meet a target of getting 70% of patients to treatment centres. But he warned there was no room for optimism until there were no Ebola cases.
This is not good enough to stop Ebola. And probably the single biggest alarming thing that I hear is that great, now we're on track because the disease is slowing down. You're not on track by getting 70, 70, 60. You have reached an important milestone along the way, but that is not going to get you to zero.
The International Criminal Court in The Hague is delivering its judgment on an appeal by the Congolese militia leader Thomas Lubanga. He has challenged his conviction for using child soldiers and his 14-year sentence. Prosecutors said boys as young as 11 were abducted to fight during the conflict more than a decade ago in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
An enemy has been slain.
World News from the BBC. A diplomatic row between China and Britain over Hong Kong has escalated, with both countries criticising each other's actions. China's foreign ministry said it was preventing a British parliamentary committee from going to Hong Kong later this month because the proposed trip was too confrontational. The British Prime Minister David Cameron said the ban was a mistake. A member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council, Emily Lau, also criticised China's response.
This is actually not the first time that the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Commons has decided to come to Hong Kong. They have a responsibility to cast a watchful eye over developments in Hong Kong. And I think it's quite unreasonable for the Chinese authorities to ban them from coming here. This is quite outrageous.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Turkey for talks with his counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan on boosting economic cooperation. Turkey is Russia's second largest trading partner, and the two countries are hoping to triple bilateral trade. Despite their strong economic ties, the two have sharp disagreements over foreign policy, particularly regarding Syria and Russia's annexation of Crimea. But correspondents say these differences are likely to be downplayed publicly. Suspected Islamist militants in northeast Nigeria have carried out a suicide bomb attack on the main market in Maiduguri for the second time. At least 6 people were killed. The double suicide bombing there last week killed more than 70 people. Earlier, suspected Boko Haram fighters burnt down a police station west of Maiduguri. An Indian diamond trader has hosted a mass wedding for 111 fatherless women and given each one gifts worth thousands of dollars. Mahesh Savani said the women from poor families saw him as their foster father. The ceremony reportedly included girls from all castes and religions. BBC News.
Thank you. This is the Newsroom. I'm Danny Cox. For 3 years, the World Food Programme has been providing much-needed food to 1.6 million Syrian refugees in neighbouring countries. But now it says it's run out of money and has had to suspend its programme. Abia Etifor works for the WFP in Lebanon at the Maraj refugee camp close to the Syrian border. She says the refugees are already in a dire situation.
Many of the refugees are not prepared for this winter. They're living in informal settlements like this one, plastic sheetings, they're taking cover, they're trying to burn whatever they can so that they have fire at night to warm their kids. It's a very difficult situation.
Let's get the latest on this from our correspondent in Lebanon, Jim Muir. Jim, what do we know? Why has the WFP run out of money?
Well, I mean, all the aid agencies are very low. The main UN agency is around about 30-40%. So they've all had to target much more closely the very most vulnerable sectors of the refugee community. And that means leaving out a lot of people who that aren't going to get it. So now the WFP, which has been the only major organization in the field actually giving out food credits, has had to actually